This analysis of what Kate does will focus on the treks on the island, some brand new ancient clues found in the temple, and the head scratcher, that is the timeline of the events. In the previous part we discussed a lot about season 6, especially some harsh criticism. This one breaks down the details of the episode What Kate Does in terms of character journeys. Let's take a peek at this map of the temple that I've made. Lennon goes through a maze of corridors, a bit humorous that he's technically going back and forward. This is the same hallway as this we see over here and the tree roots. This is all done to make the temple seem much bigger. This maze of corridors goes into Dogen's chamber. However, you can also get to the chamber through here, as we see later in the episode. It took a while to figure out the layout, but I'm quite happy with the two different entrances to Dogen's chamber, since that lines up with character movements for the next couple of episodes. Miles goes to get some water for Saeed. I think that sometime in the past episode or in this one, while they were waiting around, Miles and Hurley found out about the food court, which should be situated over here. However, it's not the same place as the kitchen, since Hurley is gonna ask Jacob 2 episodes from now where the kitchen is.
Hey man, you know there's like a kitchen in this place?
It's all the way down the hallway, Hugo.
Shortly after Saeed's apparent resurrection, they take him out to the courtyard. Dogen, Lennon and a bunch of other guys come out from this area. Sawyer steals a gun and exits the temple, demanding that no one follow him. Despite this, a search party is assembled. Kate and Jin go in here to pack their stuff. In this scene we are introduced to a new area, some sort of waiting area, and this one seems ancient. The ancient clues of the temple.
All of the Egyptian symbols were conceived of by our writers in Los Angeles and producers, and there are many surprises in those translations.
There's a lot of ancient clues at the temple, but we're gonna focus on this room. For many years I assumed this was a mirror of the major Hindu goddess Durga. She's quite visible with all those arms. However, after looking up the mirror as well as asking some Egyptologists, I learned that this wasn't necessarily the case. It's a classic Egyptian image of many Egyptians together being smited. So I searched around on various examples and found the one that the Lost Crew copied. This one. It's a mural originating from the Temple of Edfu in Egypt, showing a pharaoh smiting a lot of people, a symbol of kingship. The temple was built in the Ptolemaic kingdom between 237 and 57 BC. However, in this case we don't see the pharaoh above them, smiting them with a weapon, so the mural is more open to interpretation. Above them are more hieroglyphs from the Book of the Dead, as well as Hech and Vaj-Ver from the Papyrus of Ani. Vaj-Ver is an Egyptian god of fertility and the personification of the Mediterranean Sea. There is a possibility that the island used to be in the Mediterranean thousands of years ago, and people from Egypt came here in boats, inspired by the various temples in Egypt, and made a mark on the island. Next to him is the god Hech, the personification of infinity or eternity. Can we interpret all of this as infinite life? In the background here we can also see more Egyptian iconography, such as the Lake of Fire.
First there's this thing. We got 4 monkeys. We got this kind of wavy thing. Almost seems there's electricity or something having to do with this. Here's the same kind of thing, the kind of grill marks thing. Only now there's 4 people laying down on it.
The Lake of Fire from the Papyrus of Bakenmut, who lived around 1069 to 945 BCE, showing the bodies of the damned floating in the Lake of Fire in the underworld, which is fed by flames from braziers along the lake's edges. The lake was one of the dangers you had to pass on your way to the Duat, and the Lake of Fire was guarded by 4 baboons. In ancient Egypt, the people in the pool of water represent enemies of the king or gods, and their inclusion within the pool ensures their permanent destruction. The hieroglyphs are all from the Papyrus of Ani. If you haven't seen it already, check out the episode regarding the history of the Cerberus Chamber and the Papyrus of Ani. But just to summarize, there's a lot of phrases and images taken directly from this papyrus, which means that chronologically speaking, the scribes from Thebes from that era who wrote it either came to the island or they made a copy of it, which wound up on the island, since this papyrus was sealed in a tomb for thousands of years, and Ani lived prior to the events of Across the Sea. All of this, the Egyptians being smited as well as people being thrown into the lake of fire, makes me wonder, is there a dark chapter to the pool room? Did the Man in Black take over control here and used it to convert those who defied him into followers by smiting them, torturing them to the brink of death, and then throwing them into the pool of water, which would have fires all around it, to convert them into soulless followers? Would that even work with Jacob being the protector of the island? Or do we have it all backwards? Maybe this isn't supposed to be the lake of fire from the underworld in ancient Egypt.
Is that the pool? Maybe it's the pool of water.
I can tell you now that this is more like a tease. I will do a big episode about the early history of the island later in season 6 when we come close to Across the Sea, and that bonus episode will tie in a lot of the various clues about ancient Egypt and the episode Across the Sea. Back to the episode, Dogan examines Saeed. I think this works in two ways, both to see if he is really alive and whether or not he has been claimed by the Man in Black. It is also a way to see if he really is the Man in Black. Since the Man in Black can't get hurt, the bullets just pass through him, while Saeed's body truly reacts to the hot poker. I also like the idea that this test would also try to remove the hold Man in Black had on him, driving him away like some sort of exorcism. Obviously nothing like that happened, so Saeed is still claimed. Some guards take Saeed out of the room, through this hallway and back into the pool room. Hurley and Miles say they are going to the food court and they go in this direction, so they probably just went into this door and then in here. At the same time, I believe that Ilana goes inside the statue to mourn her father figure. I know this happens in the next episode, but timeline wise, I believe this happens now. I don't think that after Man in Black Locke beats Richard and kidnaps him, that Ilana's group would simply chill on the beach for a long time before going into the statue. Even weirder if this happens the day after. What are they waiting for? Camping on this beach near the body of John Locke? No, I believe that soon after Man in Black Locke has left, Ilana goes inside and sees that Jacob is gone. Then the others would gather up and simply trek towards the temple. The rocket was a pretty significant warning. Ben enters the statue, talks to Ilana, and they both leave. Ilana suggests that they should go to the temple as well, but Sun says that they should bury John. So I believe that they start to trek towards the beach camp during the events of what Kate does and arrive at the beach camp. Kate escapes from Aldo and Justin. She decides to follow Sawyer's trail to the barracks while Jin searches the jungle in hope of finding Sun. So all our characters are on this pathway. In my season 3 and 4 videos, I mentioned the possibility of a blocked path due to rough terrain around here, or some mudslide or something, just to explain the odd movements of Danielle, Khan and Alex towards the temple. I don't think this is the case now in 2007. Kate arrives at the barracks, turns around this corner and goes into the LaFleur house. She finds Sawyer here, and they both trek to the dock. They have a moment and he throws the ring into the ocean. But hold on for a second. Shouldn't there be a couple of outriggers parked here? There were 2 outriggers here when we last went to the dock, and that was just a few days ago. What happened?
Looks like we're not the first ones who decided to tie up here.
That'll be San and Lapidus.
For starters, Lapidus explains in Dead is Dead that he's gonna go back to the dock and take the outrigger back to Hydra Island. So that one is accounted for. The next one I believe Man in Black Locke takes. When he has finished his job and successfully used Ben to kill Jacob, he takes Richard away into the jungle and ties him to a tree. Then, in an off-screen scene, he goes to the dock to take the outrigger back. He knows it's still there, the one he and Ben used to travel to the island in Dead is Dead, and he paddles it all over here. By the time he reaches the shore, it is nighttime. And that is the outrigger we'll see later in season 6, which has a direct view of Hydra Island. So by the time Sawyer and Kate reaches the dock, the outrigger is no longer there. Man in Black Locke is currently moving it. At the temple, Jack goes through the hallway and into this chamber. Dogan gives Jack a pill, telling him to give to Saeed. He goes over here, then comes back, and when Dogan will not tell him what is in the pill, Jack swallows it, and then they talk a little bit.
There is a darkness growing in him, and once it reaches his heart, everything your friend once was will be gone.
Dogen explains about the sickness and that Said has been claimed and that the same thing happened to Claire. Jin is on his way back to the temple. He is found by Aldo and Justin. Aldo is seriously considering killing him, but then he's killed by Claire. The timeline of day 6 and 7. One frustrating part of the hardcore fan community was the timeline of the temple arc. The characters move around in a record-breaking speed all over the island because everything from Jacob's death to the massacre at the temple happened in the span of 2 days. But there were a few comments that potentially caused an inconsistency in the character movements on the island and puzzled the fans. We can't add in more days after Jacob's death because Man in Black Locke says that Jacob died yesterday in the substitute.
His name was Jacob.
Was Jacob?
He died yesterday.
So we have a situation to solve. I disagree with the timeline on Lostpedia, and I'm leaning more onto the timeline proposed by Celebok as well as Soundwave and the chronological edit called Lost Circle. Day 6 is the day Lost Season 6 starts on, where the time travelers arrive and Jacob has died. Lostpedia treats The Substitute as an episode taking place on day 6, which is crazy with all the traveling the characters do for the first 4 episodes, and it still happens on the same day. The reason it's still on Lostpedia is because Man in Black Log says that Jacob died yesterday, but he could still die in the morning of day 6. I think he did. How long would Bram's team wait outside the statue that whole night before going in? Let's say that Jacob dies at 4 AM, just to tie it with Locke's candidate number. That's in the morning of day 6. The only thing that happens is that Ben goes out, Bram teams goes in, Smokey attacks, and then the sunlight hits the statue when Man in Black Locke gathers the bodies. It is morning. The group stays outside for some hours until they see the rocket from the temple, presumably sometime in the middle of the day. The rest of the episode happens on this day, as well as what Kate does. Then there is a nighttime sequence which happens off screen. The events with Sawyer in the Substitute and with Jack and Hurley in Lighthouse happen the morning after, meaning that those treks happen at the same time, from morning to middle of the day before the day continues into the next episode, Sundown, which ends at sundown on that same day. I think it makes sense for Man in Black Locke to visit Sawyer on day 7 instead of day 6, hence why he says that Jacob died yesterday. That Jacob died at around 4 AM. This also fits with Miles' quote about Jin in Sundown.
Where's your husband?
What?
Your husband, he took off yesterday.
Jin was here? He's alive?
That Jin took off yesterday. The events in What Kate Does happen on day 6, and the events in Sundown happen on day 7. So why is the cutoff point? And what happens during the nighttime sequence? I think the nighttime between day 6 and 7 helps me a lot in terms of treks on the island. It's all off screen, but happening at the same time. One off-track scene at night is Man in Black Locke sailing to this beach. However, on his way from the barracks to this beach, he made a pit stop at Hydro Island to do something. What could it be?
You know what I mean.
Well, we're gonna talk more about it in the episode Recon. As for Claire and Jin, Claire is freeing Jin from the trap on day 6. This scene in Lighthouse is right after the cliffhanger of What Kate Does. Or else it would be quite awkward for her to stare at Jin and then come back the next day to free him from the trap. When Jin wakes up in her lair, that's the next day. So after Claire helps Jin out of the trap and he gets unconscious, she starts to drag him across the jungle. She does this during the day, at day 6, and the night. This is her lair. Another trek at night is Ilana, Ben, Sun, and Lapidus, carrying Locke's body. You could also argue if Ilana's team brought the outrigger and parked it here, then they might have taken the outrigger, traveled around here and then parked it over here and then traveled to the beach. But if they didn't, they traveled across the island. This scene, which is intercut between the scenes with Sawyer and Man in Black Locke, happened on 2 different days. They would go on a long trek through the jungle and then down the valley. Funny enough, Sun would be fairly close to an unconscious Jin again. After they walk through the main valley, they turn and then wind up at the beach camp. But by the time they reach the beach camp, it is day 7. Another thing that happens at night is Kate's trek towards the beach camp. Sawyer tells Kate that she can make it back to the temple by nightfall, but instead she goes back to the barracks, refills her water bottle, and then starts to trek towards the beach camp. She probably made a camp spot for the night somewhere. And one last thing that happens at night is Sawyer getting completely hammered in his old home. By the time we see him in The Substitute, he's been drinking all night long, so that also works well, with this being on day 6 and this being on day 7. Next episode will take us to the cliffside cave in the episode The Substitute,